Trumpets were blowing all around, loud and brazen. The wildlings have no trumpets, only war horns. They knew that as well as he did. The sound sent free folk running in confusion, some toward the fighting, others away. A mammoth was stomping through a flock of sheep that 3 men were trying to herd off west. The drums were beating as the wildlings ran to form squares and lines, but they were too late, too disorganized, too slow. The enemy was emerging from the forest, from the east, from the northeast, the north. 3 great columns of heavy horse, all dark glinting steel and bright wool surcoats. Not the men of Eastwatch. Those had been no more than a line of scouts. An army? The king? John was as confused as the wildlings. Could Rob have returned? Had the boy on the Iron Throne finally bestirred himself? "You best get back inside the tent," he told Val. Across the field, one column had washed over Harmer Dogshead, another smashed into the flank of Tormund's spearmen as he and his sons desperately tried to turn them. The giants were climbing onto their mammoth though, and the knights on their barded horses did not like that at all. He could see how the coursers and destriers screamed and scattered at the sights of those lumbering mountains, but there was fear on the wildling side as well, hundreds of women and children rushing away from the battle, some of them blundering right under the hooves of Garans. He saw an old woman's dog cart veer into a path of 3 chariots to send them crashing into each other. "Guards," Vel whispered. "Guards, why are they doing this?" "Go inside the tent and stay with Dala. It's not safe out here." It wouldn't be a great deal safer inside, but she didn't need to hear that. "I need to find the midwife," Val said. "You're the midwife. I'll stay here until Mance comes back." He had lost sight of Mance, but now he found him again, cutting his way through a knot of mounted men. The mammoths had shattered the center column, but the other 2 were closing like pincers. On the eastern edge of the camp, some archers were loosing fire arrows at the tents. He saw a mammoth pluck a knight from his saddle and fling him 40 feet with a flick of his trunk. Wildlings streamed past, women and children running from the battle, some with men hurrying them along. A few of them gave John dark looks, but Longclaw was in his hand and no one troubled him. Even Varamir fled, crawling off on his hands and knees. More and more men were pouring from the trees, not only knights now, but free riders and mounted bowmen and men-at-arms in jacks and kettle helms. Dozens of men, hundreds of men. A blaze of banners flew above them. The wind was whipping them too wildly for John to see the sigils, but he glimpsed a seahorse, a field of birds, a ring of flowers, and yellow, so much yellow, yellow banners with a red device. Whose arms were those? East and northeast, he saw bands of wildlings trying to stand and fight, but the attackers rode right over them. The free folk still had the numbers, but the attackers had steel armor and heavy horses. In the thickest part of the fray, John saw Mance standing tall in his stirrups. His red and black cloak and raven-winged helm made him easy to pick out. He had his sword raised and his men were rallying to him, when a wedge of knights smashed into them with lance and sword and long axe. Mance's mare went up over her hind legs, kicking, and a spear took her through the breast. Then the steel tide washed over him. "It's done," John thought. "They're breaking." The wildlings were running, throwing down their weapons. Hornfoot men and cave dwellers and thens in bronze scales, they were running. Mance was gone. Someone was waving Harmer's head on a pole. Tormund's lines had broken. Only the giants on their mammoths were holding, fiery islands in a red steel sea. The fires were leaping from tent to tent, and some of the tall pines were going up as well. And through the smoke another wedge of armored knights came on barded horses. Floating above them were the largest banners yet, royal standards as big as sheets. A yellow one with long pointed tongues that showed a flaming heart, and another like a sheet of beaten gold with a black stag prancing and rippling in the wind. Robert, John thought for one mad moment, remembering poor Owen, but when the trumpets blew again and the knights charged, the name they cried was Stannis. Stannis! Stannis! John turned away and went inside the tent.